actually on, sorry, on January 27th, Anthea and her company Money Made Simple received the Coming of Age 2020 Impact Award for Leadership in Positive Aging from PSS, which is Presbyterian Senior Services. And they received that award for their work, which Anthea teaches seniors how to better manage their personal finances. That's amazing work and a well-deserved award. For those of you who are not familiar with Dr. Miller's new program manager, Anthony Smalls, I wanted to kind of reintroduce you to Mr. Anthony Smalls. With that in mind, we will begin the session. So Anthony or Anthea, take it away. Thank you.
I'll pass it to Anthea. She can begin the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I greatly appreciate it, and I'm happy to be back. I enjoy teaching this series and hope that you will be engaged, will give me some great questions. This will be interactive today and going forward. My purpose is to help with the building blocks of managing your personal finances effectively. So today, okay. We have a quick agenda. We're going to talk about the 2021 Savings Challenge. Yes, we're going to have a challenge as part of this series. We're going to talk about money insights from the science of happiness. We'll explain how financial goal setting works, why saving money is like paying yourself first. Then I've got some great gamer apps that will help save money, save and invest for future goals. I'll leave you with some tips, tools, and resources, and we'll introduce challenge number 1. So our challenge for this program, which runs the month of February, each week you're going to be eligible to participate in a savings challenge related to the topics covered. So today's topic is budgeting and saving, and the specific challenge will be introduced at the end of the presentation. Next week, we're going to be talking about income taxes and tax planning. Then credit, debt management, and student loan repayment strategies. The final session is a special session on managing finances during an emergency. What are your priorities when things are really kind of crazy, as they were at the beginning of the pandemic, for example? There will be no challenge for that last session, simply because there'll be weekly submissions to Anita Wallace prior to the next webinar to qualify for the Savings Challenge. There is a prize. There are actually a couple of prizes. The first person to complete all 3 challenges is going to win a copy of How I Invest My Money by Josh Brown and Brian Portnoy. Now, I read all kinds of personal finance books. This is what I do day in, day out. I'm always looking for great ideas, books that I can share with colleagues and the people I'm teaching. I just read this book. I'm very impressed by it. I think it goes a long way to explain how to invest well. It's written by 2 financial advisors who have chapters by other financial advisors and hedge fund managers, and each of them essentially contributes a brief essay on how they manage their personal money. It's actually very interesting. Second and third place winners will receive the Wall Street Journal Guide to Personal Finance. Great classic small guide that is very, very helpful and informative. So to turn to today's subject, why would I be interested in the science of happiness? If you've read anything about this, you know it sort of cropped up in the late 90s. This was the effort of some social scientists, mostly psychologists, some economists, behavioral economists, who are interested to figure out what makes people happy. Because if we could understand what the basic structure of human happiness is, we can improve people's lives. We can certainly make therapies more effective. We can make education more effective. We can have happier people and more productive people with a greater sense of purpose. Reading about this, because again, my interest was, I talk to people about their money day in, day out. Many people have very unhealthy relationships with money. Money causes them a great deal of anxiety, whether they have money or don't. Money is often a tool that has been used in their lives to control their behavior. And so they really have these strange, conflicted relationships with money. So I began reading The Science of Happiness, and I discovered that this actually relates rather well to developing a very healthy relationship with money. So, for example, one of the insights from The Science of Happiness is that purpose and social engagement provide the deepest human happiness. How does that relate to money? Well, think about our financial goals and how we spend our money. This would suggest that expenses, spending that is directed at social engagement, going out with friends to lunch or out to dinner with buddies, is a priority more than buying more new clothes or another electronic gadget. Another insight, goal achievement is rewarding work, provided that you set the right goals. In financial planning and financial counseling, we're always talking about setting goals and working toward them. If you set these properly and you can see yourself making progress toward them, this is rewarding. Moreover, it is intrinsically motivating and keeps you going. This is particularly valuable when you're working toward a difficult goal. For example, getting yourself out of debt. That's hard work, but achieving success as you do it is very rewarding and motivating. Anticipating a reward enhances its enjoyment. This is a particularly interesting insight. The cruise industry has absolutely nailed this. If you've ever been on a cruise, you know that you make payments along the way. With every payment you make, you get more information about what to expect on board, the food, the entertainment, the trips off in various ports of call, and you get to anticipate what it's going to be like when you're on the boat, and it's fully paid for by the time you're there. So your job is simply to enjoy it. Knowing that this is the case, this is a huge argument for saving in advance of vacations and trips, that you can anticipate going on this trip and enjoy it all the more, because working toward it, saving toward it becomes part of the experience. And lastly, memories of shared experiences outlast memories of milestone purchases. Now, I totally get this as an older person. This is something that is very hard to impress upon younger people. And I remember getting out of school and being a young person and being very focused on sort of establishing myself as an independent adult, buying furniture, saving up for a car. It was all about these milestones of adulthood. And what I can tell you, looking back on this, is that, yes, I vaguely remember saving up for all these individual things that seemed so important in my late 20s. But what I still have very fond memories of and still talk about with friends are things like my trip to San Francisco with my college buddies. This was a huge event for us. All of us were scraping money together to make it happen our first year out of school, but we still talk about it. So again, if you know that this is the case, how does this influence the way you prioritize your spending? Obviously, invest in memories rather than stuff. Next, let's turn to financial goal setting. This is important even in a presentation about essentially managing your money effectively, creating a budget. Goal setting is the why. And most people get very stuck when we start asking, well, what are your financial goals? I ask clients this question all the time, and they will generally sort of stare for a moment and say, well, I'd like to be able to retire. I say, great. What else would you like to do? And essentially, any kind of thing that you'd like to have or to do or to be that involves money is basically a financial goal. So for each of us, these are very personal and values-based. When you think about it, what do you want to have now or in the future? So that is the basis of setting financial goals. So it's as simple as making a list, asking yourself, what would you like to have, to do, or to be that requires money? And to make an effective financial goal, you need to put a time frame to it and separate them. Things that you'd like to do in 6 months. For example, we're all hoping when this pandemic gives us a break that we can take a vacation, that we can go see family and friends. In 6 months, that would be a wonderful goal. In a year, perhaps you'd like to move to a better apartment. All of us are working from home. Maybe you'd like a little more space, a little more access to windows and light. That would be a great goal for a year. In 5 years, maybe you'd like a nice, fancy pre-owned car because you anticipate a different lifestyle, maybe commuting or getting away on weekends, and a car would be a great thing to have. In 10 years, you all are young. Maybe you'd like to travel for a year before settling down into your careers, your jobs, family life, etc. All valid goals. Obviously, these are just examples. You would write your own goals because they are certainly personal. Now, I'd like to give you about 40 seconds to simply jot down 5 things you'd like to have, to do, or to be, so that it will help you frame the rest of the presentation when you think about these things. So I'm going to time it, and I'll be back to you in 40 seconds. Okay, so hopefully you sketched out a couple of things that you've been kicking around that you'd like to have, to do, or to be. You can rearrange them in order of priority and certainly sort them into short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals. Why the colored paper in the corner of the presentation or the slide? When I give this class in person, I begin by passing out a stack of colored paper, and I ask each person, each attendee, to take a piece of color that resonates with them. Just take your favorite color, whatever you're feeling today. When we get to this part of the presentation, I ask them to write their goals on that piece of paper. This is that concept in psychology of priming. I want you to see your goals written on your favorite color so that when you look at them, your goals make you happy. So many people are anxious about the future, anxious about money, anxious about making goals, and we need to address this. We need to simply understand that when you don't feel in control of your money, setting goals can feel very anxiety-provoking. Writing them on a colored piece of paper, holding on to them, looking at them now and again can be very reassuring. And now let's turn to how do you build a plan to achieve these goals. Effectively, writing down your goals is absolutely the first step in building a formal financial plan. This is where I begin with clients. We talk through all the things they want to make happen, whether it's get out of debt, pay off their student loans, buy an apartment, start a family, put kids through college, pay for weddings, retire, all of this. These are the goals that we're going to build a plan to achieve. The very next step is to apply dollar amounts to each item on the list. As you do this, I'd like you to remember this very familiar rubric. It's called the SMART goal setting rubric. You may have seen this. This is huge in business schools. I think they even teach it now in high schools for various topics, but it's super, super helpful for financial goals. And basically what we're looking to do when we set a financial goal is to make it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and most important, time-bound, okay? Because if you don't give yourself a deadline, what you're intending to do will continue to drift off into the future. It remains a dream, a little fantasy, a daydream. It never gets really accomplished. So here we have an example where somebody wants to lease a car during his residency. He's making $1,800 a month. He'll need to put $2,000 down when he signs the car lease. So he needs to have $2,000 in 12 months, very specific, measurable. It's achievable if this person can save $166 a month. Realistic, we don't know quite enough about this gentleman's budget to know if he can realistically save $166, but it's certainly time bound. If he doesn't come up with this money, he won't be able to lease the car. So do this with each of your individual goals. Give yourself deadlines. That's very effective for making things happen, especially with money. Now we're going to talk about the topic of the day, why budget? And I always include this picture, or I've begun to include this picture in this type of a presentation, because this makes even me sad. And I help people with their household budgets every day. Every day we're talking about, monthly expenses, writing them down, making sure we've captured everything. And when you look at this, this is a pretty dreary exercise. It probably causes this person some degree of anxiety to write down all of these fixed expenses, get to the bottom and realize, ooh, plus credit cards. Probably this is why the pen's down and this person's taken a break to do something else. So how do we embrace this idea that is so effective for helping us master our money when it seems like dieting and denying yourself things that you want? Well, the first thing we're going to do is to simply change what we call it. Rather than a budget, we're going to call it a spending plan. Already, this sounds better. It's the equivalent of saying, I'm not on a diet. I'm making some lifestyle changes. Sounds a whole lot better, right? Doesn't sound like self-sacrifice and denying yourself things. You're simply going to plan the way you spend money. And the premise is you use a plan to manage the money you earn and the money you spend so that your essential expenses are covered and you make progress towards your financial goals. It's why you think about your financial goals up front, because if you're only thinking about paying the rent, you end up sort of foregoing the time and attention it takes to achieve your financial goals. So yes, what I am suggesting to you is that when you identify your financial goals, you're going to include them in your monthly budget as though they are expenses. The idea is to save toward them on a regular basis, again, with some deadline in mind so that you've got the money to pay for them as they come up. So here you can see taped to the piggy bank are all the things that people aspire to. The one in the middle, probably the most enticing, is a vacation. So including the idea or including a vacation line item in your monthly budget so that you put money toward it will help ensure that it actually happens. The mechanics of putting together a budget or spending plan are fairly straightforward. The first part of the budget is always identifying sources of monthly income. And whether you go online, there are many, many, many different very good free budget templates for running a household on a monthly basis. Most of them are based month to month because most people's bills come due on a monthly basis. But there isn't a huge reason to pay for a budgeting template. You can print one out and start to fill it in. So on the top, we talk about and identify sources of income. So number one would be paychecks from a job. Then you have scholarships, stipends, dividends and interest payments, royalty payments. If you're an author or a musician or an artist, you may be getting these from your publisher. Gifts and inheritances are a form of income. Certainly you can use this to cover your living expenses. And then we have, of course, other. And other is that grab bag that is appropriate to New Yorkers, many of whom have little side hustle businesses that they do, whether it's part-time consulting, part-time babysitting, working as a part-time caterer, apartment sitters, dog walkers. There are just endless ways that people make a little extra money. What I do find challenging, and I work with a number of people who are entrepreneurs, pivoting from corporate jobs, first careers into starting their own businesses. Many of them stumble over documenting the money that they're making from these little businesses. So they want to make it their full-time thing at some point, but they're not being serious and documenting how much they have come in, what their expenses are to run the business, etc. So it's important that you do include this as part of your monthly budgeted income. Otherwise, what I see happen over and over again, it's sort of frittered away on incidentals. So you got to be more strategic. The next section in putting together the budget are obviously our expenses. And we typically start with our fixed expenses, the essential ones, our rent or mortgage payments, insurance, whether this is homeowners insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, car insurance, things that you have to continuously pay for to keep the coverage intact. Utilities, gas and electric, got to keep the lights on and the stove working. Food. Now, food is one of those crazy categories. We can all live, and many of us have during the pandemic, very modestly, where you go shopping at the grocery store and you cook the majority of your meals. And it's a pretty good way to save money on the food category. Alternatively, and I know most of you are busy students with very little time to cook for yourselves, there's Uber Eats, there's all kinds of food delivery options and fast food and takeout to fit into your busy schedules. One of the challenges is that food category, we all have to eat, but we can spend a varying amount of money on that particular spending category. And with these phone apps, it's really kind of insidious. It doesn't feel like the money is coming out of your bank account as you click and have the food show up at your door, but it does. And it adds up pretty quick the more you use it. Transportation, I used to rail about people leaning on Uber and Lyft too often. Same problem. Once it's an app on your phone, you have that frictionless transaction. You don't feel and recognize how much you're spending on that category. There's less of that now, since most of us are commuting much less and working from home much more. But it is an important element and an essential expense. Tax payments. If you are an independent contractor, you may need to make quarterly payments, tax payments to the IRS and New York State. Having the money to make those payments on time is important, so you would have to include that in your essential expenses. And lastly, of course, we have our medical prescriptions, co-pays, our cell phone, and our laundry. All of these are needs, meaning that the vast majority of us have to pay these things each and every month just to keep the operation going. So if these are needs, we know that everything else is essentially a want. Things that we like to spend money on, but don't necessarily need. And the tricky part is that this is what we all fantasize spending money on. This is what we're thinking about. New clothes, tickets to events, travel, gadgets, jewelry, music, all of this really engaging stuff that's a lot of fun. And I'm not saying that you have to cut this out and live like a monk and this is wrong and don't do it. Not at all. It's simply, we need to understand that our wants are endless. They're going to change over time, but they'll always be there. And that if we are looking to save money to make sure that we achieve our financial goals, which may include some of these items, that we're mindful of how much money we actually spend in these categories, because this type of spending is often sort of unconscious. You do it, you don't really think about the implications. How will you find the money you will need to reach your financial goals? This is the question I get most of the time as I'm teaching this class is, my money is so tight, I don't know how I'm going to find extra money without, getting another job or giving up eating or something like that. No, not necessarily true. The majority of people have some unconscious spending that they do on a regular daily basis that can be found and reallocated. The number one way to do this effectively is to keep what's called a spending journal. If you read a lot of personal finance articles, this is the tried and true method for really figuring out where your money goes on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, particularly if you spend cash, or even if you do spending with a debit card or a credit card. You may see when you look at your statements that you spent $60 at Target. You won't remember what you spent it on. However, if you keep a record of what you spend your money on, you're going to see your habits. You're going to see that there are some items that, in hindsight, you might not have spent money on and would have preferred to allocate that money toward your financial goals. So I've taught this class for a number of years. And rather than have people go out and get a formal notebook, which seems kind of serious, what I found is particularly effective is to work with a packet of Post-it notes. You can keep it in your handbag or your pocket as you go through the day. You spend money on coffee, you take a ride on the subway, you buy lunch, you pick something up on the way home from work, off to class, whatever it is, you write it down on your Post-it note. You get home, you put the day and date on it, peel it off, stick it on the fridge. Do this the end of the week, add by category each expense. So go across your Post-it notes. What was spent on food, transportation, incidentals, entertainment, etc. If you do this for 6 weeks, remarkable things are going to happen. I've taught this multiple times. I do it with my students to encourage them, and I don't make them reveal what they learn. I share what I learn as I do it with them. But you're going to see your spending triggers. You're going to find out when you're vulnerable to walking into Dunkin' Donuts for a huge cup of coffee and a couple of donuts. You're going to see when you're vulnerable to buying another pair of shoes you probably don't need, or getting online and looking at and buying stuff. I know my weakness is books, as you can see behind me. I have a big thing about books. They don't make you fat, and it's very hard to control some of these temptations when you're in a certain frame of mind. You're going to see these patterns across your Post-it notes. The other interesting thing is if you do this consistently, if you promise that you will write down every expense, you're going to get to the point where, as you're about to spend money, you start to bargain with yourself, whether or not you have to write it down. Now you're recognizing elements of your relationship with money, that you do have these sort of blind spots where you spend money, but you don't really think about it, or you don't want to think about how much you spend in that category. An example that I can share from a prior class was working with a young woman, was in this class of 10, doing a personal finance course. We did this exercise, and she had a pretty good job, was making, I think, $46,000 a year. She was in her 30s, early 30s. She said up front, I really wish I could contribute to my company's 401k plan. I've been there a couple of years and I just don't have the money. And kind of looked at her and said, okay, well, we'll work on that. Let's talk about that in a couple of classes. We did this exercise, and what she discovered after about a week and a half is that she spent $7 to $10 a day on takeout coffee. When she discovered this, she stopped cold turkey, no more takeout coffee, and she signed up for her 401k plan. So, which was a happy ending. Me as a financial planner, I thought that was great. I couldn't give up coffee cold like that, but I was impressed that she recognized that she was willing to make that change. So you will find things that you would be willing to change, reduce, give up in order to fund your financial goals in your monthly budget. Here's an example of a way that this can play out. This is a portrait of a person who gets up every day, buys a coffee and bagel at the deli on the way into school or work, picks up a couple of lottery tickets because, hey, you never know, pack of cigarettes, and they go off. Lunch is a trip to a fast food joint, middle of the afternoon, needs a Starbucks venti latte to keep the day going. Simple, ordinary habits adding up to $30.19 a day. If you do this 7 days a week, that coffee and bagel is a $19 habit. Lottery tickets set you back $14. Cigarettes, it's $101. That's a very expensive habit. Same thing with the deli or fast food lunch and the Starbucks latte. Now, the really amazing part is when you annualize this. If you're doing this, each of these habits every day, that coffee and bagel is $1,000. Lottery tickets, over $700. Cigarettes, almost $5,700 or $5,300. Fast food, Starbucks, hard to believe that a venti latte a day could cost you $1,700 a year, but it all adds up to almost $11,000. Now, if you think about this, that's $11,000 you got to make net to pay for these habits. You haven't paid the rent. You haven't bought yourself a pair of shoes. And we haven't even talked about dinner. So I'm not saying that these are terrible habits and nobody should do this and, give it up and save all that money. No, let's look at what happens if you modify this. What if rather than 7 times a week, you do these types of habits 5 times a week? What would happen? Well, the result is you would only spend $150, almost $151 rather than $211. So you're saving yourself $60 a week. And over the course of a year, simple changes, you'd have more than $3,100 sitting in your bank account. Pretty interesting to see how these small spending changes can add up to significant amounts of money. This is low-hanging fruit too. This is not major spending changes. What could you do with $60.38 a week or $3,100 a year? In 6 months, you could save up $1,500 and go off on a no-debt vacation. You go off, you enjoy it, have a great time, you come home, no scary credit card bills following you in the mail. How wonderful would that feel? In a year, you could have $3,100 saved up for your next security deposit on a better apartment. In 5 years, you could have almost $16,000, which will buy you on CarMax a certified pre-owned Lexus or Audi, depending on how many miles you want on the odometer. And then if you did this for 10 years, you could save up more than $31,000 if you wanted to have a blowout year sabbatical of travel before settling down into your career and family life. How amazing is that? So small changes. You may look as you look across your Post-it notes and find other ways that you're spending money that, in having had the opportunity to observe and inspect, you will now change and find yourself able to save far more money each month or even periodically. So the critical thing is to set up your financial goals as spending categories in your monthly budget and allocate a specific dollar amount so that you're accumulating it as you need it according to your deadline. Most people make the number one mistake, which is, I'm going to save what's left over and I'm going to just save it in a big bucket. I'm going to put it into my savings account and then I'll make plans about what I do with it. Well, 2 things happen. When you're only saving what's left over, that becomes a smaller and smaller little piece of money. And when you put it into one big savings account, it ends up getting spent on other things that come up, new tempting things, that dinner with friends that wasn't in your original plan, trip you didn't intend to take, all these little ways, or some upcoming, problem that you have to deal with, car repair, etc. So being meticulous and saving toward these specific goals will help you actually make them happen. And that is a source of happiness. Couple of tips on cash flow management. If you're paid bi-weekly, and I run into a lot of new college graduates who struggle with this once they're working and they're getting a bi-weekly paycheck, And they say, well, my first check of the month covers the rent, and then I get to spend my second check on everything else that I need. The problem with that is if you're paid biweekly, the rent's due on the 1st, your paycheck might come in on the 4th. So they can get fairly wide apart, and that will cause you some stress. Instead, get to the point where you set aside half of each big ticketed monthly expense from each paycheck rather than separate them first paycheck, second paycheck. This smooths your spending and smooths your saving. It will require you to have some savings in the beginning to kind of adapt this, but it makes it easy peasy going forward. And honestly, what you can do is for all of your essential expenses, you can figure out what they are on a monthly basis, cut it in half, and do that so that you've got everything covered. First half of the month, grocery budget, and then from the second check, second half of the month, grocery budget, etc. Another tip, spend only your budgeted amount on each expense item, even if you use a credit card to pay for it. You have to remember that credit cards are payment mechanisms, but they are also financing mechanisms. And one challenge I find is that people don't count what they pay for using a credit card. They don't consider it part of their monthly budget because they've put it on this credit card. That's a way to get into debt and have a debt balance that you then need to pay off. So stay true. It's hard when you've got a credit card because you're less conscious of the money you're spending, but don't overspend if you're using the credit card on that particular item, whether it's clothing, going out, groceries, etc. Another tip, schedule your credit card due dates to sync with your monthly or biweekly paychecks. I mean, a lot of people who have everything due on the 1st of the month because they only want to sit down and do bills once. Well, then you've got to be really conscientious about how much money you keep in your checking account so that you can pay the rent, your insurance, your credit card bills, particularly if you have more than one credit card, this gets to be a lot. So you can call up a credit card company and say, can I move my due date? And make it sync better with your biweekly paychecks. Another great tip, if you have 2 credit cards that you like to put a lot of your day-to-day spending on, and most of us have one that we lean on, we're collecting dollars back or reward points of some sort. If you use 2, you can have one that you use for the first 2 weeks of the month, and then you have your second card, you use that the second 2 weeks of the month. What this does for you is keeps those balances that you're going to pay off modest so that they're synchronized to not hit on the same day, and you manage it so that you never spike your spending and have a big bill to deal with. Another great tip is to set up automatic billing to a no annual fee rewards credit card for vendors that don't charge. So think of all your subscriptions. You're probably doing this already. If you have Netflix, Hulu, water delivery, maybe your Verizon bill, your internet, if you've got Fios or Cablevision, if you put this on your credit card, yes, you get the reward points or dollars back, and you no longer have to worry about cutting a separate check and making sure that payment is on time. So it makes bill paying a whole lot simpler. Right now, Con Ed charges for this. So I think that's rotten because I think most people would be happy to put their Con Ed bill on a regular credit card so that you don't have to pay that separately, but they charge you based on the value of the charge. And that just seems painful to pay for. So I keep mentioning setting aside savings towards your financial goals, building them into your monthly budget, making this a regular habit. You can, if you're saving for something significant. So for example, when I'm working with people who are trying to save up for a down payment on a house or a wedding or a new car, some big ticket item, I recommend that they consider splitting their direct deposit. So you go to your payroll department, you say, I've got my direct deposit coming into my checking account. I'd like to set up a second one to a different account. Now, the benefit of this is it happens automatically. Doesn't rely on you having the willpower to sit down and transfer the amount that you need or want to save each and every month. Boom, it happens. It's the same premise of a 401k or 403b plan. You set it and forget it. It happens over time. You don't see it, you don't spend it. You can, with most payroll departments, set up multiple direct deposits. They'll tell you how many that they will entertain. So you can have your vacation goal, you can have your down payment goal, your new car goal, whatever it is, your emergency savings fund, whatever, and this can happen automatically for you. The other alternative is just to set up a recurring account transfer so that it's automated and not relying on you and your willpower when you'd rather go out and spend on something else. For discretionary monthly spends, things like dining out, Uber, clothing, travel, entertainment, track that spending against your budgeted amount using the Good Budget app. And I'm going to show you what that looks like toward the end of the presentation. It's a great way to keep your arms around those types of spendings categories that can get a little bit loosey-goosey. All of us enjoy going out and traveling and viewing entertainment of different types. It gets expensive, and it's a big area where we tend to go over and spend more than we intend. Now, when you underspend on a discretionary expense, for example, dining out, deliberately apply the saved amount that you didn't spend to a specific financial goal and give yourself a pat on the back. And why? Because again, you're achieving that goal. That's motivating. That keeps you going. If you're using this technique to pay down credit card debt, that's particularly important because paying down debt by itself is a heavy slog. It feels good when you've made a lot of progress, but it feels like you're running in sand typically when you first get started. So make sure you celebrate hitting certain milestones and finding extra money to throw against that particular goal. I mentioned that I've got some gamer apps to share with you for saving money. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I find this so compelling. Most of us have played games of some sort or another. I have college-age boys. They play a lot of games. I'm always kind of leaning over. They are wrapped. They are totally engaged in these games. They go level to level, the power-ups, the whole thing. They are way, way into it. It's got intrinsic rewards built into it. It is psychologically powerful, keeps you engaged and going. There is a professor of gaming. Her name is Laura Gonical, and she writes about game design, how games can help foster cooperation. So it's from sort of a psychological standpoint that she addresses the power of gaming and what it does in communities and among individuals. So pretty interesting. She's given some TED Talks. Her most famous TED Talk was the history of super better. She was in her office and managed to hit her head. I think it was on an overhead cabinet, and suffered a traumatic brain injury. And it took her a year to recover. She was really in a bad way, physically, emotionally, psychologically. She really struggled to overcome this injury. Like a lot of people who suffer from traumatic brain injury, she suffered from really debilitating depression and suicidal thoughts. And she realized that as she was struggling just to get out of bed and not feel pain, that she needed to embrace what she understood about games to help her recover. So she created a little game in her head where she would give herself points for taking a shower, making a meal, going outside, contacting friends, whether through texts and getting engaging with the outside world. And she created this little game that truly helped her pull out of this dark place. And she realized in doing this that people need to understand how to embrace gaming to make this happen for them. It works beautifully with money. It really does. Money and saving and achieving our financial goals are challenges that we often get discouraged by. And so if you can take a gaming approach where you challenge yourself, you collect and activate power-ups of some sort, you recruit allies, you go for epic wins, it will keep you motivated and doing it. And that success will again reinvigorate your efforts and help you be more successful. So here is one gaming app that I really like. I mentioned it before, goodbudget.com. And what it is the old envelope system of budgeting. So you probably remember your grandmother, I certainly do, with the paper envelopes, one for the rent, food money, car money, vacation money, putting money into each of them as the paycheck came in. These are electronic envelopes. So the way it works is you set up an electronic envelope for groceries and you indicate how much you want to spend on groceries in that particular month. So in this example you see on the screen, grocery budget is $150. And so far they've spent $46.27. Gas, they've budgeted $65, eating out $50, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Good Budget would like you to buy a subscription. It's, I think, $7 a month roughly to have unlimited envelopes and to set them up and to run them this way. But they offer a free version where you can have 10 envelopes for free. And here's how to use this, because you don't need to put expenses that don't change don't waste an envelope on the rent or your cell phone bill or your utilities. Stuff that's the same every month is really not where this has a lot of value. But if you put things like you're eating out, entertainment, travel, clothing, groceries, the stuff you want to kind of keep an eye on and maybe rein in a little bit, this is brilliant. And I can tell you, I had a client who had a huge success with this. A young woman, I worked with her a few years ago. She had a great job, made a lot of money, traveled, went out with friends all the time, had lots of vacations, beautiful wardrobe, the whole bit. She came to me because she wanted to buy an apartment. She really didn't have the money or the savings habit to get together the down payment. So I said, how about we use this app? We'll try it out for a month or two and see how it goes. And then we'll talk about whether we can up your spending or up your savings rather toward this down payment goal. Well, she called me about 8 weeks later and said, this has been amazing. Said, I am religious about tapping in on my phone, everything I spend as I spend it in my categories. And I am finding myself putting things down in stores and leaving because I don't want to spend the money. I want to allocate that money toward my down payment goal. Well, fast forward, she bought that apartment at the end of 2019, and she credits this particular app as the tool that got her to really think about her spending habits and change her relationship with money. So it's a good one. I like it. It's great for couples. You can share an account. And so if one's out to do groceries and the other is out buying clothes, you can kind of see it in real time as the spends are keyed in. Another great gaming approach to saving money. Don't know if you're familiar with the Acorns app. This is a more sane alternative to the Robinhood app, which takes gaming to a crazy dimension with their options and all that sort of stuff. This is a saving and investing app. When you open up an Acorns account, you can do it on your computer, you can do it on your phone. You are actually opening up a bona fide brokerage account. New account form, same as if you walked into Fidelity or Vanguard. They want to know basic information about your income, your liquidity, your risk tolerance. So they ask the same type of risk tolerance questions. How would you feel if your account value went down by 20%, et cetera? They ask about your investment time horizon. When do you need the money? In answering all these questions and in opening up your account, they will tell you you are a moderately conservative investor or you are a very conservative investor. And the example on this screen shows a conservative investor. And if you were to contribute to an Acorns account with a conservative portfolio, you would be investing in government securities, meaning US Treasury bonds, money market instruments, and similar, very liquid, very low volatility, low risk investments. It's sort of like a money market fund, basically. Now, what's brilliant about this, the investment portfolios, whether you end up with a conservative one or a very aggressive growth portfolio, the money is invested in exchange traded funds at Vanguard. You've probably heard of Vanguard. They are, on certain days, the largest money management firm on the planet. They invented the index fund, which is the low-cost way to invest in broadly diversified funds. And these are some of their same great products behind your portfolio. What I love about it, I love a lot of things about it. You can start investing for as little as $5. You set it up so that $5 comes out of your checking account each and every month and goes into your Acorns account. Now, they charge $1 a month, so you will see on your statement $5 and then $1 fee. Your account will build. You will get notices to check your current statement, look at your current progress. They have little tools like on the far side that shows you what if you increased your contribution amount, how much more quickly will your account value likely grow. And this is very helpful, particularly for new investors. Very cheap way to get started. I love the low dollar amount. They also send you newsletters talking about the markets and help to educate you on investing terminology, asset classes, market strategies, and things like that. So it's a very good beginner tool. The other thing I like about it is that you can do roundups, meaning that you register a credit card or a debit card with your Acorn account. And as you're out spending money, in this example, you say you spend $4.64 at Cup of Joe, 36 cents, rounding it up to 5, gets put into your roundup account. And when that reaches $5, the money comes out of your checking account, goes into your Acorns account. The other thing you can do is if you get a sudden windfall, spend less on a particular category one month, or you get some kind of a refund check or a rebate check, you can dump that into your Acorns account. I mean, you just make a one-time contribution, transfer it right in. This is super, super motivating. And I have a friend who's another financial planner. He does this every day. He's a little wacky about it. Every day that the market goes down, he puts $10 in. So if it goes up, he only puts in 5. So every day he is engaging with this app, and he too recommends it to clients and colleagues. So it's a very good tool to use. Another no-cost strategy, similarly, an investment strategy for accumulating money toward longer-term goals, is a brokerage account where you invest in Schwab stock slices. Now, what is this? These are called fractional shares. This is a relatively new concept where rather than buy a full share of Amazon, which is now about $800 or $900, I think, I haven't looked at it lately, you can buy $5 worth of Amazon. So it costs nothing to open up a brokerage account at Charles Schwab. You do it online. You fund the account with money you send over either by check or bank transfer, and you can invest directly in these Schwab stock slices. You get a brokerage statement that shows the growth of these investments. You can pick one or all of these stocks in the S&P 500. And I'll show you a little picture of some of the more popular ones. So for example, if you had $5, you could buy $5 worth of Best Buy, of Apple, of Nike. If you sent $50, you could invest it across more of these particular firms that make up the S&P 500. So you get a regular brokerage account statement. If any of these companies pay a dividend, you get a proportional dividend. Over time, you're going to see that your percentage increases, and you've got over time, if you continue to contribute on an ongoing basis, this can grow to a sizable investment account. And again, there's no fee charged for investing this way. So it's another way to get started. And Schwab too has a very good website that does provide some investor education along the way. Another way to save money, you've heard of rebate apps. This is a fun rebate app. They promote using it for saving on items in grocery stores, which to me is the least interesting way to use this, because you're getting 50 cents, 25 cents at a time. Unless you do a lot of grocery shopping, that seems like, chasing nickels. But if you look at the middle image, they have enormous partners. Amazon is a partner. And so the way it works, you can go on the app, you register a debit card typically, or you can buy gift cards through the app to spend at these stores, and you get rebates based on what you spend. You can use it in store. You can use it for some of the partners online, and it covers so many different spending categories, whether you're looking at, Target, Costco, Home Depot, Walmart, Lowe's. All of these companies are there. They have a whole bunch of pharmacies. They've got travel companies, sporting good companies. A lot of chain restaurants are included, and the list keeps growing. They'll often have promotions, and say Walmart, before like back to school, normally their rebate might be 3%. They'll double it to 6% for things that you buy either in store or online. It adds up quick. If you are strategic about it, you're going to spend money, you're going to take a trip, for example, you're going to travel anyway. If you book through here, use your Ibotta app, you can accumulate some significant savings over the course of the year and take that money either paid into your PayPal account or in the form of gift cards to any of their various different retail partners. So it's a fun app to play with. They use gaming to keep you going. There are all kinds of bonus points. You can recruit allies. So for example, if you share it in your household, you and your roommates or you and your significant other are also using the same account, they'll put you in competition who generates the most rebates and kind of give you incentives that way. So they keep it fun, keeps you engaged with it. Another way to do this, obviously, if you don't have time to play with these types of apps, are to look at great cashback reward cards. And looking on bankrate.com, Citibank has the double cash card, which a lot of people are walking around with now, because you get two benefits: 2% on purchases and 1% cash back when you buy. So actually, the way it works is you get 2%, 1% when you buy an item, and 1% as you pay that. So if you're purchasing something and paying it off over time, you collect a total of 2% everything you spend money on. So it's a no annual fee card and a good way to get actual cash in hand for your spending if you don't have time for a rebate app, simply because you kind of have to pay attention to that one. So a couple of tips, tools, and resources. Online budget templates. One of the more famous ones is from mint.com, which is Excel based. A lot of people like it because it does the add ups and all of that sort of stuff. You can buy a version, a subscription, where it will download information from your bank and from your credit cards securely and populate your budget. Now, my beef with that is that people who automate it in that fashion almost invariably stop looking at it because there's nothing to do. it's all done. They don't have to update things after a time. And when you stop looking at it, you stop making decisions about how you're spending your money, and it's like having no budget at all. Another good phone app for managing expenses and income, if you have irregular income, is the Expense OK phone app. It is like a 99-cent app on the Apple store, and it's very helpful. You create your categories, you key in your expenses, and it makes a nice little pie chart for you, shows the breakdown of where your money is going. So if you're running a little business, for example, this is helpful. If you're running a household, this is very helpful. And again, because it gives you these nice little reports, you kind of can stay on top of where you are with your money. Bankrate.com, you can shop for free cashback credit cards. Practical Money Skills. FTC.gov, the Federal Trade Commission, helps and watches out for consumers. I like sending people to their website simply because the information it contains, not selling anything. There are no product pitches. There's no fancy jargon. It's very objective, straightforward, personal finance, education, everything from saving, budgeting, credit, debt management, investing, very straightforward. Super Better if you're curious about Laura Gonical's website and how to use gaming techniques to increase mental resilience. And her TED Talk was really impressive as well. All right, we're at the end. Our savings challenge. I mentioned that our financial goals are all unique and based on our own individual values and desires, but every one of us should have an emergency savings account. And the rule of thumb is that your emergency savings account should be sufficient to cover 3 to 6 months of your essential living expenses. Now that means just your needs. So that's not saving, it's not things like your cable bill, your dining out bill. It's what does it cost to keep a roof over your head, food on your table, and your essential bills covered. When you do the add up, you multiply that by 3, 4, 5, or 6 months to figure out what your target goal is. And then figure out how will you achieve that? How long will it take? Now, when you look at what you spend on your essential costs each month, that's usually a significant nut. So when I say that you should ideally have at some point 6 months worth of essential living expenses in a savings account, most people are kind of concerned that that's going to take a long time. That seems impossible. Nobody gets there overnight, but you never get there if you never start. So this challenge is to write down your essential expenses so that you know what that number is, figure out what 3 times that number would be, and then outline a plan for achieving that amount. How would you do it? How long would it take you to accumulate a 3-month emergency savings amount? So the outline does not have to get into too much personal information, but it talks about what amount would you set aside, what spending habits might you change to prioritize this particular goal. And that should be sent to Anita Wallace before next week's class, next Thursday, so that we can know who our participants are competing for our book and personal finance guides, our prizes. I'd be happy to take any questions anybody has before we wrap up.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
So most of the times when I try to plan a budget, a lot of times I hear people say you use your total salary and you start breaking down the budget. But I prefer to use everything that I get after taxes, after insurance, after that. Should we go by that calculation?
So when I do this a lot with individuals, I tell them, let's use your net check. And we're going to give ourselves credit for how much you're putting into, if you have like a 403B contribution, we're going to identify that as savings that has already happened. So, but yes, use your net check because you can only spend your net pay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But I will point out that if you're paid bi-weekly,
Mm-hmm.
you get a little bit more per month. And this can be tricky since they're 26 weeks, or no, 24 weeks. If you're paid every 2 weeks, they're 26 pay periods. So they're 2 months where you get paid a second time.
Oh,
And most people get that and just spend it. So if you are mindful of it, you can save that money more aggressively.
okay. Do you have any other questions for anybody in the crowd?
Okay.
So Anthea, this is great, Reg Miller. So every year we have this conversation about students who are living just hand to mouth, and they're overwhelmed
Yes.
about this. Can you just talk to them about that reality? I know there are other people who feel the same way, but how do they even start to do something like this or approach these issues?
So I totally get it. That sense where you've got so much going on and you're not living on a lot of money to begin with, and everything, life is expensive in New York. But if you keep that spending diary, if you do that, you're going to see where there's a little extra. And it's not that hard to adopt that as a habit. Do it for 6 weeks. You only need to do it for 6 weeks to get the real education from it, where your money goes, where the holes in your budget are, because we all have holes. We're all doing things that we're not that conscious of in terms of how and where we spend money. And that's where you can exert control and change those habits to begin to save more money. And I say this with certainty because I actually gave this presentation and introduced that idea of using the Post-it notes at a homeless shelter. And I had a class, we were teaching personal finance 101 for people who had, really no money. Most of these people were receiving very little cash assistance, were not yet employed. They were in education programs to eventually get jobs. But they did this and they realized on these tiny little meager incomes that they could save money, and that by saving amounts of money, and for some of them, the goal was $5 or $10, they were able to meaningfully change their ability to pay for some of the things that they needed. So it does work. And that's something you control. So do the spending journal, use the Post-it notes if you find that helpful, because when you feel in control, you'll make progress and you'll find success.
So that's really the point for the students. It's not how much money you're able to save. It's just developing the habit. Even if you're saving just a few dollars,
yes,
starting a habit is the critical thing.
Yes. And once you crack that code, because most people think, well, there are two types of people. There are spenders and savers, and spenders will never become savers. That's not true. By doing this, by looking at our actual behavior and prioritizing saving, you can make this a lifelong habit. And once you embrace it as a habit, you're going to find so many things like this that are easier to do. You're going to, at your next job, sign up for the retirement savings plan. And you'll notice there are other ways that you can save on a tax advantage basis. And you will now have the money and feel that sense of personal control over money decisions that will let you do this. So you won't be in your own way.
Hi, all. This is Anita Wallace. Anthea, I just wanted to ask you about the Robinhood app, since it's been, a major news story this week. I just wanted to ask you your general overview or your opinion about the app for new investors or small investors.
So the reason that I guide people to either the Acorns app or to stock slices through Charles Schwab is that that's enough excitement. Robinhood really amps up the gaming element. What they're really about is getting people to buy and sell options. Now, you can get hurt really hard if you don't know what you're doing. And they are working with people who have never invested, have never taken a class on options. You know, you get a little introduction on their app on how it works, but you can get stung pretty hard. And a lot of those people who've been participating in the game stock phenomenon, where they've pushed this thing up
Right.
and are getting hurt. I mean, people who cashed out early, good for them. They had some winnings. But now, if you've watched, the stock has been down double digits 2 days in a row, still very volatile. And some of these people are really going to suffer a beating, I'm afraid. What I don't like about it is it's really all about excitement. And they use the gaming engagement tools to get you to bet more. It feels like gambling, not investing. And that whole idea is very detrimental. We don't gamble toward our financial goals.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So folks, it's really important to emphasize that, you know, you're getting free financial advice here, and it's important to ask questions. Don't be shy. I can tell you this personal thing. It's kind of sad to acknowledge, but so I take the train into work, or at least I used to before COVID. And so my train ticket's like $3 something a month. And for close to 15 years or so, I just paid it. And then one day I had the epiphany, well, maybe I should enter into the transportation program and pay for that ticket with pre-tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It took me way too long to figure it out. However, the point is, that was an easy thing for me to do that I had just overlooked all those years. And I'm sure other people on the phone are doing those same types of things, because it was just part of my pattern of spending,
Mm-hmm.
but I was giving away money.
Right.
Yep.
And when I did that, it essentially lowered my tax burden as well.
Yes. And we'll be talking a bit about tax burdens next week. We have our webinar will be on taxes and tax planning. And all of you as students may say, oh, you know, doesn't apply. I don't have that big a tax bill because I don't make that much money. The idea is, if you understand a little bit about how the tax code works, you can make better decisions, because there are all kinds of incentives for taxpayers to save for retirement in particular, but also there are other advantageous ways to put aside money. So we're going to talk about that, talk about what you need to know to effectively navigate the 1040, if you haven't done that for yourself before. Too many people rely on their tax preparer to give them great tax saving tips, and that's not really what tax preparers do. Tax preparers do the returns. And by the time you're in there talking to the tax preparer, your opportunities typically are very, very limited on saving on your tax bill. So we're going to give you what you need to know so that you can be better prepared going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Actually, I just have a comment. I'm a sophomore in college, and I know I have these times where I'm struggling a lot financially, then I'm kind of stable, and it's like these up and down battles, and this is really, really helpful. So I just wanted to thank you guys.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I know what it's like to be a student, a college student in New York. Financially, it's not easy.
I just wanted to say to the group, as the days move forward, if you think of any questions, please write them down. You can email them to Anthony and myself, and then we can coordinate them and forward them to Anthea.
Great.
Oh, sorry, I have one more question.
Sure.
I had a few college friends who wanted to make it today, and something came up and they couldn't. Is it too late for them to come next week, or?
No, whenever they're available, they can join.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. I'll let them know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And will this presentation be available for folks who couldn't make it today?
I think it was recorded, correct?
Yes, we are recording this session.
Perfect.
So Wilson, your friend who couldn't make it today, you can let them know that they can also access this, as well as anybody else who has a friend who couldn't make it. This is rolling. Information is different every time. So whenever people can come, they're welcome.
Mhm.
Okay, and able to, in order to access this recording, would they have to email the email here on the screen in order to get that recording of this
think-
session?
Think if
Hey,
you,
my email was put in the chat, anthony.smalls@mssm.edu. If you
Oh,
send me an email, I can send you a link to the video that will be on our online Zoom account.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I actually have a question. So, Ms. Perkinson, like, let's say we wanted to reach out to you like personally about like financial stuff that's related to this presentation or like other financial things. Like, can we do that, or do we have to?
sure. I mean, if you want to send me an email or give me a call, that's fine. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anthony, I'll add the your email address on future presentations so people know where to get the Zoom link.
Okay. And do we have any other questions before we end the session? If not, we will reconsume next Thursday, same time, same Zoom link. I will definitely send out reminders throughout the week. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Ms. Perkinson. And thank you all for joining. Everyone have a wonderful night.
Tell a friend.
Tell a friend to tell a friend.
There you
Yep.
go.
Thank you so
Anthony,
much.
Thank you, Anthea.
care.
Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.